I'm going to be sharing just a few slides right at the beginning. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got three links that you can use to refer the information that I'm going to give you. So I'm just going to pop them into the chat. I'll do that after I'm done. The next thing I'm going to do is give another introduction to myself. Those of you who follow the sort of geek channels, GitHub developers and so on, will see somebody by the name of Ancient Geek. Now that's me. I I was present in 1969 when the Unix operating system was first launched, and I was one of a team which actually helped implement that on the Edinburgh multi-access machine. I also had the great pleasure of working in the Edinburgh Machine Intelligence Unit, which simply illustrates that the technologies we're talking about are really quite old. And the question we've got to ask is, why is it at this point, 50 years on, those technologies are now coming to the forefront and having such an impact? So the next thing I'm going to show you is just going to share, if my mouse will work, a couple of, for some reason, yeah, here we go. Couple of slides and then I'll start. This is a graph which I got from Statista of the global market share for desktop operating systems as of February. And the blue line is Windows users. Now, Windows, I will talk about this, has the captive market in desktop applications. It does not have the captive market in server, and it does not have this in mobiles. But you'll see, even in its own captive market, Windows is steadily declining. And although this doesn't show, what's actually happening is Linux, which is the modern version of Unix, is catching up. That's the kind of background to everything I'm going to be talking about. The next slide simply is a paper which I'm going to show you the link to, which tells you how DeepSeek works. Now, there's a very important point about DeepSeek, which is it's not rocket science. You don't have to have a degree in tensor calculus or Heisenberg's wave equation, spend 7 years getting published in Nature in order to understand it. Actually, you can follow it by just unraveling the language a bit, because every technology has its own language. I mean, car drivers have their own language, right? Left hand down a bit is something you have to know what that means. But it's not more difficult than learning what left hand down a bit means. So there is a paper which explains why DeepSeek is working, and it mentions the three features of DeepSeek which are central to its advances: chain of thought reasoning, where you get the app to explain how it reached its conclusions and then interrogate its own methods; reinforcement learning, which is methods of actually making the app get the right result more often; and distillation, which is one of the crucial advantages, which made it possible to implement DeepSeek on a much smaller capacity machine than was thought to be possible by the sort of Silicon Valley Trump geeks who thought, you have to spend 100 billion to get the hardware. It'll be like Bitcoin before you can get it working. This explains why the team got it working. This third, I think, is incredibly interesting. This is the paper introducing DeepSeek R1. It's not been published yet. You can see it on Khan, and it's a list of the authors. And there are 50 of them. And then at the bottom, it says 100 additional authors not shown. These are not employees of DeepSeek. These are people who have collaboratively worked on an open source project to produce this over many years, and then being acknowledged as the key contributors behind that. If you go to the GitHub site, which I'll also refer you to, of DeepSeek, you'll see, there are 54,000 contributors, which is not huge, but it's a damn sight bigger than the employees that a traditional capitalist can bring to bear by just paying people wages to do stuff, to produce proprietary material. And the final one, which I think is rather interesting, the license by which the material is distributed. There are two licenses. There's the code license, which you get to lose. That's just a standard MIT license. You can use it as long as you don't sue us if it damages you. This is the model license, and this is the sort of stuff that I think would make a Trumpite turn in their grave or wake up at night, because it's full of what would be called woke language. It says you're not allowed to use this model to exploit or harm minors, and then it goes on, and you should read, for any use intended to or which has the effect of discriminating against or harming individuals or groups based on social behavior, exploit the vulnerabilities of a specific group of persons based on age, social, physical, or mental characteristics. If you use this model and you violate any of these, you're in breach of the contract, even though it's open source. So the product itself, in a certain sense, embodies its own morality. That's something that I think is an important feature of what is now going on that I'm going to be talking about. Okay, how much longer have I got left, Rodica, after going into all that? Anyway, I'll start. 5 minutes, okay. There's been many talks of this as a moment, as a Sputnik moment or a Linux moment or whatever. It's not, as Radica has pointed out, a Sputnik moment, because when Sputnik was up, the Americans had no space program. Now they already claim to be in the lead. But a guy called Samir Mitra, who is one of the inventors of Java, has just called it a Linux moment. And he's talking about this steady advance of Linux, the operating system, over in comparison with Windows. My objection to that is it's not a moment. Linux has always been around. It never had a moment. It actually appeared in 1991 when Linus Torvalds got so fed up with DOS that he published a new operating system, which was a run anywhere system, so it didn't depend on proprietary hardware, and it was based on Unix, which Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie, he of Kernighan and Ritchie for the geeks amongst us, who invented the C language, actually launched in 1969, as I said, when I was there. The real question is, why has it taken so long for the better product to reach the point where it actually is a serious challenge to Windows? And I've only shown you what's happening on the desktops. In operating systems as a whole, the majority of operating systems don't use proprietary products. The server market is 90% dominated by Linux. The Android market is all Linux based, and all the attempts that the US has made to sort of squash that with its intellectual property model and its trade war against China have just caused it to be slightly reinvented to do the same thing. So actually Linux now has more than 50% of the world market on operating systems running on machines. The problem is that it's taken this time because the US has set its sights on crushing the way that Unix and all these products were produced, which is open source. And what I've given you some idea about how open source works is it's just that glance at the number of authors, go to the GitHub site and look, and the way that the morality that's emerging from that. And this approach began in the middle of the unipolar moment when the sort of globalization was in full swing, and there was a sister organization of the World Trade Organization called the World Intellectual Property Organization. And this basically attempted to turn mental products, ideas, into private knowledge. And it basically set out to demonize this piracy, exactly what DeepSeek is doing, and to, incarnate in this, Microsoft's exclusive right to run operating systems and so on. And it's not working. It's ceasing to work, but it's taken a long time. So from the get-go, there was basically a conflict between what I think are two property forms. Just as when agriculture came in, landed property of the aristocratic type first came in contact with capitalism. Capitalism actually had to challenge the laws by which the ownership of agriculture and its proceeds were distributed. Now there's a challenge to the laws by which ideas are distributed. Now, Radhika's got a finger up, which suggests I'm running. Yeah.
About 1 minute.
I should manage that. So why is it working now? Because this is a technology which has always been more efficient, produces better stuff, it works better, but has been challenged by this 50-year fight that the US has waged against it. And my answer to this question is very simple, that when you have a new property form, which is what a new technology based on a new property form, open source use of access to rights of access and use of knowledge and production of knowledge, you have to have a new social system to make that work. one that prioritizes the key factor in the production of this product, which is intellectual mental labor, which is the last thing that the US system prioritizes, is support for creators. The whole model of Chinese technology is precisely on developing its workforce. More than that, it has, and I'll finish on this, a different concept of what intellectual property is for. And you'll see this in Trump's charge that China is stealing what the US produced. Well, DeepSeek is not theft. China produced it. What's happening is the US is trying to stop other people using what is actually more efficient and better. And the reason is the understanding, I'll just finish on this, of intellectual property that the Chinese social system has, which it is for everybody. And their model of use of knowledge is to disseminate, whereas the model of the US is to block. And this is a conflict not just between two technologies, but between two social systems, two visions of the road forward for humanity.